Welcome to the market recap presented by Tackle Trading. Get in the game.
Good afternoon, Tackle Traders, and hello, YouTube. This is Frank coming to you with the market recap. It is Wednesday. It is the 13th of June. It was kind of one of those, broadly speaking, boring days in the market as we just kind of sat around and did a whole lot of nothing from a broad perspective. There were some things moving and shaking, though, as there oftentimes typically usually are, right? And welcome out, everybody, to the market recap. Great to see you guys, as always. I hope you had a great day trading, both in and out of the market, of course. Taking a look at the heat map, it was a little bit of a mixed bag. We saw some nice movement in utilities, kind of following through what we kind of saw in that little pullback that had been developing these last couple of trading days. You saw a lot of pressure in the semiconductors. This is going to be an interesting test, in my opinion. We've kind of talked about them in a variety of places as of late. Finally getting some selling. They've had a nice little rally. Let's see how this one goes. Are we able to establish some support and move back into the semiconductors, or are we going to have a deeper pullback? I think that might have an impact on how big of a pullback this market may want to have. And good afternoon, Patricia. Hi, Ed. Good afternoon to you as well, Micah. Great to see you guys as always. Hope you are doing well. Hope your Wednesday was nice and smooth sailing. So yeah, you nailed it, Whitney. It was definitely a yawner. We're just still sitting on that support level pretty much all over the place. Those little intraday levels just kind of hanging as of right now. Hi, Emily. Great to see you. Welcome out as always. So semiconductors are going to be fun. We did see Facebook see some pretty good downward movement here today. More strength over in the healthcare sector, though, as well. And of course, let's not forget our good friend in energy really selling off today in crude and in the energy sector as a whole. Maybe getting some pullback opportunities in our industrials, though, particularly some of those stronger holding up defense companies. We'll take a peek at a couple of those before we're done today. Before we get into that really light earnings, we do have Lulu reporting here this afternoon. It looks like at first glance it was an earnings beat on both EPS and revenue, and that's about as far as I got, as much as information there was available. But it does look like there was a beat on Lulu. Very, very light beyond that. No real names to speak of reporting before tomorrow's open other than Lulu. Whitney said it best. I mean, today was a really yawner. When you go to the 15-minute chart on the S&P and you have to actually hover your mouse over the candlesticks because you can't tell where yesterday ended and today began, you know we're off to a slow start. And that's exactly what we did all day long. Just a little bit of a drift, not really doing anything. I mean, it was a yawner is a great way to describe today, Whitney. There is no doubt about it. That does put us on a little bit of a doji, kind of sitting right above that 50 period moving average. I would still, like we've kind of talked before, I think a pullback is in order, but even just a couple of days can really loosen things up. You know, at least in my mind, PayPal and Lockheed Martin both kind of sitting on their trend lines. They certainly weren't the only ones out there, or their short-term moving averages, I should say, not their trend lines. So little pullback can go a long way if the market doesn't need a little bit more of a pullback. It really seems like we're all basically waiting for somebody else to decide, is it a pullback or is it a consolidation? Nobody wants to make that first move. I don't blame them. I don't want to make that first move either. And hi, Brenda. Great to see you. And welcome out, Adib. Good to see you as well, my friend. So really not a whole lot to see at this point in time. Again, for me, for strong confirmation to the bullish side, at this point, we need to push through this resistance that's developed this week. That's going to be the broad signal from a bullish point of view. Already started to see some bearish activity creep in. The banks kind of were hit hard today, at least relatively speaking, not a disaster, not nearly as hard as the semiconductors, but we saw a lot of selling in the banks, you know, financial sector overall, but it was really kind of concentrated for the most part in the on the banks. We've been a little bit worried about them. They're in for a big test too, I think. Other than that, we're kind of waiting for that support level to establish, confirm through some upward movement. I would like a little bit more of a drift, let this 9 EMA catch up with us and then get that upward movement. I thought that was maybe a stretch, just even yesterday, but after a boring day like today, maybe the market wants to chill for a minute, and that would help that develop. So we don't really have a strong level of support. I mean, we could talk about the 50, we can talk about those intraday lows, we can talk about the 9 way down here, we can talk about the swing, the bottom. Not really a strong, hey, this is support, this is the line in the sand, so to speak, in my mind right now. So we're still kind of seeing, is this a pullback, or are we going to get some upward movement pushing through that resistance zone, which would be a pretty good signal to the bullish side in my mind. Of course, the S&P was boring, so was the Dow, kind of sitting on that old break. We at least have a little bit more of an idea of where we might have some support on the Dow Jones, simply because we've already broken out, right? We did that, use that old resistance as a little intraday support here today. Again, we could, some upward movement could be a little bit of confirmation, but I think to get that signal, it really is the push through the resistance that we have established throughout the course of this week, around 26,220 thereabout on the Dow Jones. Beyond this little support zone that may be forming here, again, same thing that we're running into on the S&P. We need to pull back and then show upward movement, so we know that that swing is the support zone we want to be looking at, right? So we're still kind of waiting on the development side of things. NASDAQ was hit the hardest today, of course, with semiconductors, First Solar, NVIDIA, Applied Materials. I mean, across the board, it was in the red. Some of them, 4, 5, 6% down on the day. And so that certainly worked its way into the NASDAQ. And kind of like we talked about, for a few days now, that really is a big part of things, in my opinion. How do we respond? We've had that really nice move on the semiconductors, and I always forget their ticker symbol. So I always have to just do this. There we go. SMH. One day I'll remember it. We had a really good bounce after a lot of weakness. And of course, these are, these companies are very susceptible to trade war stuff. Very easy run. And now we're seeing some selling. It could go either way, right? Depending on your time frame. We have that 9 to potentially catch us, but this is the test in my mind. I always believe in the kind of old school thought that semiconductors really help pull the market one way or the other. If we can create a higher low, show some upward movement, and of course break resistance would be a really nice signal too, that could really, help us push through these resistance zones on a broader level in my mind. If we, work all the way back to support, we might be in for a little bit of a sell-off. So this is an interesting one to be watching. I don't really have a strong opinion. I've kind of got the popcorn out for this one. And of course, that's going to directly translate into the NASDAQ, much like everything else. Right now, we're waiting for some support to form. We've got a little bit of bearish momentum, not a lot. We certainly haven't seen the bears pounce, on the opportunity to sell. They came in pretty good numbers in the semiconductors here today. Just north of 76 is going to continue to be that resistance point. Again, hopefully we establish a support level in the next couple of days, and then we start moving up, and then we can say, okay, well, that's support, whatever that ends up being, right? That's what I get for trying to draw a line live and in person, but hopefully you can see where I'm coming from there. So still looks like we're on a little bit of a pullback phase, but again, even looking at the, the NASDAQ that was the weakest here today, still that little intraday floor developing and holding, at least as of right now. Somewhere in the not too distant future, some money's going to have to make a decision. Deeper pullback or a little shallow retracement. And we will have to see who wins that fight. Over in the rut, still doing that weird little dance at that 15, 20 to 25 range. Doesn't really know what it wants to do. Did sell off today a little bit, catching those moving averages. Never took out that little bottom that we were looking at yesterday, right? That's probably, can continue to be, if we see that break, there might be a little bit of more selling pressure develop, but really kind of held its own here today. As it's just one of those days. We don't have many of those days as of late, right? So one of those days where nothing's happening seems a little bit odd. So on the support side of things, I think we can continue to look at 15 as a level, 1460 as a level, and on the resistance side of things, we're just going to have to continue to watch these averages kind of in the middle, more of a neutrality state still in my mind over on the Russell. As we move into our sectors, materials remain strong. I mean, we've had ample opportunities now for a while, for several days, all week long. So, so much quality run last week, right? We saw some huge moves, and we've had great reasons, in my opinion, to take profits. And really, broadly speaking, we're not seeing it. It just continues to hover at that resistance level that could still ultimately lead to a pullback. But now it could actually lead to a next leg breakout if and when we can take out this resistance just north of $58. These companies remain very, very strong. There is no way to really fight against that. It's just how strong. Lynn just continues. I mean, we saw these huge runs, and they're just still, they look like they're kind of running out of steam, but you know, they haven't even broken the previous day's low yet, right? So, it just continues to show a lot of strength. Maybe we're not going to get a pullback in this space. Maybe it's going to be more along the lines of those consolidations. Did get a little more of a pullback in APD. That's about as good as it gets these days on this sector, apparently. So it continues to remain very strong. I have a hard time wanting to bet against the sector right now. A little more consolidation might be helpful for us, setting up new entries, but for any of us who are still in from last week, we're in no rush for that pullback, right? It doesn't have to hurry on our account. Good afternoon, Scott. Good to see you, buddy. I hope you're doing well, my friend. Over in energy, finally saw that downward movement. We gapped down on the open, and while the market was fairly dull here today, we really spent most of the day just drifting to the downside in the energy sector. I don't think that surprises any of us. Whether or not you were a bear at this price, these last few days on energy, you probably weren't a diehard bull with where it was. And so we certainly started to see some bearish opportunities develop. I know we've talked a lot about APA. They certainly gapped down with the sector here today, and really kind of much like the rest of the sector, sold to the downside. There are certainly opportunities for us if we are bearish in energy. Plenty of bearish retracement opportunities. I still like APA, but that's an eye of the beholder thing. There are lots of choices. ExxonMobil, really big move here today to the downside. You've got Chevron that's held up a little bit better, but failed their breakout. Probably better choices. If we see too much selling, we're going to be back to the discussion of potential breakdowns on things like EOG and SLB. They both are kind of hanging by a thread at some support. You're seeing similar things in Conoco and things like that as well. So there's plenty of bearish setups out there in the energy sector right now. Definitely a good thing to see. Whether or not you're a bear, you always want to know where resistance is. Now we've seen some downward movement. So if I am looking at potential future bullish opportunities on energy, well, now I can do create that higher low, let these bearish traders have their fun. If we create that higher low and then work our way up and take out resistance, I finally have a bullish signal that I can work with. That's not where my head is, but that would be a bullish signal now, right? And so we could at least kind of start thinking ahead a little bit. Looks like an area in my mind. I've been watching, as you guys know, this as an opportunity for a bearish retracement for the last little while. I'll continue to look so here. Yeah. I mean, on APA, it's a little tougher on the option side of things. If we're looking at credit spreads and things like that, Ed might be looking more towards, some of the bigger, more liquid optionable companies, Exxon and things of that nature. Not necessarily specifically Exxon, but yeah, APA kind of falls more into a short trade. Not a great, again, it's eye of the beholder, I guess, but not necessarily the credit candidate. I wouldn't fault anybody as long as they were happy with their credit. But if I were looking for credits, probably just with kind of how APA behaves, I would probably look elsewhere. There certainly will be lots of options, though, in my opinion, at least, Ed. If you're looking at it from a credit perspective, there are plenty of, most things look something like this. I'm not sure how the options are looking on Hess at this point, but they could kind of fit into that discussion. Holly could fit into that discussion. So there are lots of alternatives out there, in my opinion. And with energy in particular, it really feels like, for the most part, I'm bearish on energy, less so on the ticker symbol HFC or APA, but I would agree with you with the APA, a little easier to work with on the stock side of things than the options, particularly the credit type of trade. So we'll see where this one takes us. On the support side of things, really quick, we can kind of look towards this swing low, but right now it's just continuation of the trend, in my opinion at least. And as long as we're below yesterday's high now, I will continue to feel that way personally. Over in finance, a little bit of selling going on over here. Once again, primarily concentrated in the banks. Most, a lot of the areas, with other industries were down a little bit, but it was really the banks that were kind of hit the hardest here today. The JP Morgans, the Wells Fargo, your money managers like, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. You look at the asset managers, not much to see, just kind of a day, right? Not a lot of movement one way or another, some up a little, some down a little bit. Same with the insurance companies, nothing too terribly dramatic. We've seen tremendous movement in the exchanges as of late, and they're kind of, in that pullback phase. Let's see if I can get into there. You got CME kind of sitting on that 9 EMA right now. You've got ICE, that's not quite the pullback, I don't think, that we're seeing in CME, but very similar in its nature. Even NASDAQ, which is a little less liquid in my opinion, at least on the option side of things, pulling back. Again, these are very strong stocks, not very deep pullbacks. Maybe they're not for me, or maybe they are, but certainly they held up okay here today. Once again, it was really concentrated in the banks. I don't know that we should be bearish, but I do think we need to be cautious when it comes to those banks right now. Just, they're not looking great. The big ones, the JP Morgan, that's not a great looking chart, right? I mean, maybe you want to go bearish, maybe you don't, but it doesn't inspire a lot of bullish confidence. Bank of America, same type of thing. Wells Fargo maybe triggered into some bearish retracement candidates here today, for some traders. Citigroup maybe holding up a little bit better, but still not the most beautiful of charts. So that's really where it continues to show me at least the most weakness in finance. I'll continue to be careful when it comes to those, really on both sides. They kind of feel like they're kind of in the middle and undecided range in my mind. But on the actual ETF, this pullback is not necessarily a bad thing. We've got some movement in the exchanges. We've got some movement in some of those insurance companies that have really shown a lot of strength. So maybe it isn't necessarily tomorrow, but maybe some pullback opportunities developing in the days to come within that space. On the ETF itself, let's get back to the actual ETF here, see where we find ourselves. Holding on that 27, we've got these averages, and this is kind of what I want to see overall in the market, finally catching up with that 9 EMA to act maybe as a little bit of a support catalyst. So a little bit of upward movement could be an interesting area. A little more downward movement, there probably could be some downside, especially in some of those banks. If they want to sell, there does feel like there's room to the downside on the banking side of things. So an area I think we're open-minded to, both bullish and bearish plays going into the days ahead of us. Over in industrials, again, kind of like the financials, and this is really what I want to kind of see happen on the broad market. Let's establish some support. Let's get some upward movement so we can call that support. A lot of times these short-term averages can act as the catalyst for us, and it looks like, at least for today, that's what has happened in the industrials. Now, we've talked a lot about them, and they've been very top heavy, and we saw a lot of selling in our defense stocks, and a lot of the charts aren't going to be looking quite as strong. Northrop Grumman, I mean, I don't love that chart because it's violated support, right? And maybe it's just me being paranoid, but we have created that lower low. Of course, UTX really has taken a beating, caught a little bit of a ground here today, but not the most inspiring of candlesticks here today. So an area we can continue to watch, because you still have things like Lockheed that's kind of sitting right on that 20 period moving average. That's an interesting looking, pullback opportunity in my mind. Similar things on level 3, kind of in same general ballpark, and maybe like it being on top of the 20 better than below it, but I'd need to get back above there anyway. You also have, it was SPGI, another one, not necessarily in the defense sector, but a service provider of some sort, for the industrial sector, kind of sitting on a breakout point. So some of these areas are looking like pullback maybe if we can see some upward movement. Still have to worry a little bit. It's kind of a mixed bag on the transport companies. You look to see them do well, but their charts don't really inspire me, right now. You do have a Honeywell, though. I thought this was an interesting one, kind of consolidating at resistance. CAT getting that opportunity, not really a great looking bearish retracement. It moved up too much. You guys know me, I don't like deep retracements, but certainly some selling. Let's see where this one takes us. If we can kind of get some movement back to the upside, could be an area from a bullish side of things. On the other end of it, I mean, there is room, just because I don't think CAT looks like a textbook bearish retracement doesn't mean there's not room between where we are and where support is. I mean, we've got $8 before we get back to support. So an interesting area in my mind as we're kind of moving into the second part of the week. If I'm looking at pullbacks this week that have had a chance to at least start to develop that aren't in the utility sector, it probably is going to be on those really strong trends. And there's some very interesting looking charts in my mind for that, if that's what I'm looking for in the industrial sector. Maybe more bearish candidates in the energy sector, but I was surprised how many little pullback type of deals, not maybe the textbook pullbacks, but very strong trends in some of the stocks in the industrial sector. Tech, again, this is semiconductors. This is an area I continue to be careful with. I need to get confirmation on those semiconductors to feel comfortable with it. And maybe that's just me being too conservative. It wouldn't be the first time I was accused of that, but I need to see them establish some support before we get moving, before I'm too interested in the sector as a whole. We saw how many, you looked at the ETF and you can pick your poison here. You want to look at NVIDIA, moving to the downside, arguably downward movement away from entry for a bearish retracement as early as tomorrow, if that's your type of thing. You want to look at Broadcom. I mean, we can look at really anything, and all of them on some level or another are not looking strong, at least in the very short term, right? Maybe it is a pullback. We establish some support. That's what I'm interested. Micron working into its support level. First Solar down big today, and it really shown some nice movement. So it really was across the board in the semiconductors, and that certainly can impact tech. It certainly can impact the technology ETF. It's less the other companies within tech, by the way. Cisco, I still believe belongs in everybody's bullish breakout watch list, whether it develops or not. That's a really interesting pattern, and I'm glad it pulled back. Let's take another run and have a weird looking cup and handle develop there. So that's still, very interesting to me. Your MasterCard, your Visa, kind of in a little bit of a pullback phase. So it really kind of works. I mean, IBM kind of looking pretty darn weak in my mind. Adobe not inspiring a lot of confidence in my mind either. So it's not everybody. It's really concentrated in the semiconductors, for me at least. I could understand some bearish arguments there. I wouldn't want to get too crazy from a bullish side of things until I saw some support form and some upward movement within the semiconductors when it comes to tech. And maybe like I said, maybe I'm just being a little too conservative or cautious, but oh well, I guess. I guess that's what it is. Over in staples, just a little more of a move to the upside. I mean, we're kind of tuckered out. I mean, we've had a really good run, kind of drifting small body candles here so far this week. Of course, this is kind of having that fight right at that last line in the sand on the actual ETF. So it makes a little sense. Continues to be a strong area. And again, maybe it's not today. Maybe I need a pullback before I'm excited about moving back into the sector as a whole. But I can't really, the only bearish argument is last time we were at $59, that's where it turned around. And that is true. Can't really dispute that. Beyond that, all the moving averages are working for us. We've been showing relative strength. We've been moving when the market's moving. We've been moving when the market's not moving as of late. So, I still have a hard time getting behind anything other than a bullish argument when it comes to the staples. Now, with all of that said, I mean, some of these things are flying a little far from home. We still aren't that extended on PG here after breaking out, but our Coca-Cola, I mean, that was a heck of a run. I guess we're supposed to like Coke over Pepsi right now. Not that Pepsi's done anything wrong. Can't complain about Pepsi. Coke's just been better, right? Colder and more refreshing the last couple of weeks. So, we're kind of floating a little far from those moving averages, but tremendous strength. Walmart, just another big green candle after breaking out. I mean, things are pretty strong. Now we have PM. This is an interesting candidate from the bearish point of view in my mind. We've just been hanging on this floor for over a week now. We're getting that 9 to push us down. Eventually, we're going to have to make a call, right? Either the support gives out or we break back above that 9, showing at least a little bit of a bullish signal. So it's not all strength within this space. That's a pretty interesting little floor here today. WBA, again, another one that you could easily argue is some downward movement tomorrow from a bearish retracement entry running into the 50 yesterday. Big red candle today. If we take out today's low, conveniently, we're taking out those short-term moving averages too in this case. So think, maybe it is an area that is more kind of stay the course than running around going out of my way to find new trades with kind of where we are overall. But overall, I mean, you have to respect the strength that we're seeing across the board within this sector. So not a lot to say about it other than it's been very nice as of late. Over in utilities, we saw that upward movement early, and we really were able to carry through fairly decently throughout the day. We saw some movement right out of the open on the gap up, pulled back a little bit, but buyers were willing to step right back into it, feeling like maybe this is the pullback that they've kind of been waiting for. If you have been looking for pullback opportunities in XLU, again, they're there, just like they're bearish retracement candidates in the energy sector. There are certainly bullish retracement candidates in the utility sector. SRE was an interesting one, even though it's not a retracement, has a little bit of a cup and handle. I threw it on Twitter, and I think it was Ryan who also, and I think he probably just did it on his own, threw it up in the clubhouse where we kind of this little cup and handle pattern forming on a break. That's an interesting pattern in my mind. But if that's not my cup of tea and I am looking for utility stocks, you guys have looked at these guys quite a bit, right? We've got, a little confirmation upward movement in knee. We've got, the AEPs of the world, very, very similar. So just depending on, your flavor, there are certainly going to be, whoops, I hit the wrong button there. Well, that works too. That might even be a better, maybe that was the better one. That probably looks like it has a better risk to reward ratio than some of the other stocks, just kind of looking at where we are from support to resistance. So there are opportunities if we want them in the utility sector on a pullback side of things right now. In my mind, been a strong area. Wouldn't want to bet against it by any stretch of the imagination. Got resistance, still got some ways to go. As you guys know, so many of these stocks are in great upward trends, hitting regularly hitting new 52-week highs. So an area that we want to continue to be strong on. If nothing else, we know that 59 is a little bit of support that we can look towards on the ETF at this point in time. So continue to be a strong area. Healthcare continues to hang in there too, really showing quite a bit of strength after breaking out late last week. Just continues to show some very nice strength. Was watching Lilly to see if we could get some downward movement for that K trade this morning, and well, that was not happening. That was not happening, at least today. Pretty much across the board, we were seeing quite a bit of strength. And I think it's probably worth taking a peek at some of these stocks. We've talked a lot about them, but Johnson & Johnson, I mean, that's a really interesting one because they had, that lawsuit news. I don't exactly know what was going on there, but I mean, it just shook it off, right? Broke resistance here today. Wouldn't be my choice. Some of the plans were a little slower today. That was one area within healthcare that wasn't quite as hot, but we're seeing things, break out potentially as early as tomorrow on Pfizer now after some pretty good selling yesterday. AbbVie continues to hold that support zone at least for another day. Merck finally working in and actually hitting a new high. And so, I mean, just a lot of strength extended to the upside, at least it feels that way in a lot of them. But we've really shown a lot of strength in the healthcare sector as of late. I think we have to continue to respect that strength on the actual ETF. Coming back and where to go. I think, again, we're kind of looking at this old resistance as our primary or first level of support, letting these short-term averages catch up for that secondary level of support. But we've shown some incredible strength there. I mean, it feels like there's a reason to take profits in many of them, but it felt like that on Monday too, and buyers continue to work their way in to that sector. Over in discretionary, much like the market, I mean, it was a boring day, a really flat doji, down 0.03%. That kind of says it all. Really, it continues to be the same place that it's been. We want to continue to look at things on their own, in my mind. Great strength in some, questionable in others. I was looking at Nike, and I don't know that there's a trade here today, but they have been just desperately trying to break that 50-day moving average for 3 days in a row and just keep getting pushed down over and over again. Booking after a nice bounce has to deal with the 200 period moving average. McDonald's had a really nice bounce back after that 1 day pullback, right? Some nice upward movement yesterday, following through here today. So again, it continues to be an area that we look at just from an individual component basis, in my mind, at least. But an area I think we can like on both sides of the coin right now, at least. Real estate, little upward movement as we kind of saw some movement kind of come off of that little W type pattern. I don't remember if that was the 15 that we were looking at yesterday or the hourly, but the 15 kind of works. We had that W pattern. We pushed through that, drifted a little to the upside, not as much strength in this sector today as we saw in utilities. Probably doesn't mean a whole lot. Certainly it was not as strong of a day though as it was in utilities. Just again, another day, we hit a new high on the ETF. Continues to be a strong sector. Not really a whole lot to say interesting about it. There are some interesting things to say about XLC though. This was an area that showed quite a bit of weakness here today. You've got a Facebook that I think you could argue has triggered today, and certainly could argue if we break today's low tomorrow, could argue that as well. Had a little doji. We started with a little doji early in the trading day, and then it just kind of really started to go the other way. So while we were seeing some boring activity throughout the market, you can kind of see Facebook Zoom broke that little intraday floor. It was trying to make a second doji, not inspiring a lot of confidence, at least letting us know where resistance is though, right? Where, hey, that's where our resistance zone is. Google, again, very similar type of a day, some downward movement, ended up hanging out with the doji, but still doesn't inspire a lot of confidence within that trend. You also saw the video game stocks all really struggle. Activision, Blizzard, EA, I mean, that's really nothing new. They've been kind of in these ranges for a while now, but certainly a lot of weakness here today in them, and also in Take-Two. Take-Two has actually shown some strength within the gaming space. They don't make as many games that angry gamers play, apparently, but a little bit of a pullback going on, but certainly some selling over there as well. It was really hard to find anything that was really that impressive. We continue to see Verizon in this weird, I don't even know what Verizon's doing, so I'm just not even looking at it. I just look at it with you guys because it's kind of entertaining to look at it and say it's weird. Comcast holding support still, but we're stuck in a little bit of a range, a little bit of a bounce back day for Disney. But an area that continues to concern me, broadly speaking, and when I was looking at the ETF, there's actually something kind of interesting developing over there. The only thing you have to remember is, well, it's kind of, well, not kind of, it's very Facebook and Google heavy, right? But we've really established a little intraday floor after that downward movement on that daily chart. We've established resistance, downward movement here today. If that gives out, that's taking out, of course, that 9 EMA. That looks an awful lot like a bearish retracement. I don't really love the idea of trading this ETF because of how tight it is, as you guys know, to Google and Facebook. But technically, some downward movement, that's going to look an awful lot like a bearish retracement to me. So it was certainly, for a boring day, there were some interesting things. Really good movement in utilities, some pullback opportunities if we want them developing over in some of the big strong movers in industrials, and that's going to work into the financials now too, and into the exchanges, into some of those upward trending insurance companies. So there's going to be some opportunities. Gotta love where we are on the energy sector. If you're looking, we're looking for bearish retracement. Who was it? It wasn't CMA. I forgot who they were. I threw them up on the Tackle Trading Twitter. I wanted to take a quick peek at them, and I'll just sneak over to the Tackle Trading Twitter and find it. You have DVA, another in the healthcare sector for a bearish retracement. Yeah, be sure to join us over on Twitter. It's a fun place to be, an easy place to share charts. There was a CMC. That's who I was actually thinking of, was CMC. There we go. Knocking right on the door of resistance. Not really triggered yet in my mind, but really at that kind of precipice where we have to make a decision sooner rather than later. So we're going to have good opportunities on both sides. And those were some of the areas that really jumped out to me, some of the stocks that really jumped out to me. There's always a lot more, right? You guys may not always agree with the ones I look at. There's always plenty of options. Looks like it's going to be a fun end to the week. And good afternoon, Ilka. Great to see you. Glad you made it, my friend. So a lot of fun things going into the market here tomorrow. And then, of course, it'll just be another small doji day because that seems to be the way it goes, right? Over on the VIX, not a whole lot to see here. We know the drill. Usually you see a do nothing day in the market, you see a do nothing day in the VIX, and that's exactly what we have seen here today. The dollar index showing a little bit of upward movement, really trying to hold that 200. While I don't think this is a great trade for a swing trader, it's probably some pretty good movement today for intraday traders on the dollar. I think this is an important price point for it, beyond my lack of interest in trading at this point in time. Like to kind of see it recapture that 9. I can understand. We've talked about it a lot. I mean, buying off the 200 on the dollar index has been profitable lately. Trust it, don't trust it, doesn't change that fact, right? So it's I guess kind of nice to see buyers willing to put their money in there. Just because I'm not one of them doesn't mean I'm not rooting for that to happen. Continues to be our kind of first level of support. That gives out. We've got some stages to go, 95.75 into that $95 mark. So this should be an important level. As long as it's holding, it would make sense that it at least is going to try to hold. Need to see it kind of recapture. There's going to be a lot of things. You guys know me. I don't like deep pullbacks because there's a lot of things in my way. Don't like things in my way. I'm a wimp. I'm conservative, and I like things that there's no resistance or support, in my way for a little while. So I'm not really all that keen on a pullback this deep, but it is nice to see some of the bulls step in. We did see some interesting development on the gold front here. We kind of talked yesterday. We were kind of right in this little pinch. I'm not exactly sure where we closed. Somewhere in here, we were kind of in that 50-200 pinch. We popped out of it and really saw some nice movement to the upside in the short term. That's why we like those pinches. So certainly didn't really do us maybe any favors from a swing trading perspective. But when we look at the chart, coming off of that doji yesterday, some upward movement here today. Now, we don't have a lot of room between where we are from, currently to our resistance zone up here at 1350, but certainly nice to see people willing to step back into it on that pullback. Continues to be an area as long as it makes sense from a technical point of view, fits into the system. I've got no problem with people wanting to buy gold at this point in time. It's really done quite a number of reclaiming what was kind of a dead chart for us for a while, right? Really kind of starting to show some nice movement. We've looked at that 13 and a quarter area as support. Now that we've seen buyers literally step in off of it yesterday and nice upward movement off of it today, I think we can put even more weight into it. That should be a pretty decent line of defense for the bulls on the support side of things. Over in silver, not too much to see here. Continues to be an area that is kind of been working with gold, but the technicals again on gold in my mind are just so much easier to work with right now than silver. We just can't ever seem to catch that final push on silver for whatever reason it might be. And I'll continue to shy away from it. Very least, I think we have to reclaim 15. I've said that way too many times over the last couple of months, but it's still where it is. We can kind of look to this low, though, as an important level of support right now. Saw the buyers come in the last couple of days. We have seen some upward movement. Today's candlestick isn't the most inspiring of candlesticks. If that floor gives out, I think you could make a little bit of a short-term bearish argument, but that would probably make more sense on an intraday level to me than a swing level. Kind of in a mixed bag. If we create this higher low and we actually can take out this resistance, then we've recaptured trend, and then I can start being interested in silver. Right now, it is a watch for me, and I'm going to leave it alone. In natural gas, not a whole lot to see here today. A little bit of a drift down as we work into that 9 EMA. We knew that these guys were likely to have challenges as soon as they ran into whatever, right after that big breakdown. Bear starting to step in. I'm not going to fault anybody. As long as it's in their system, I wouldn't want to be anything but a bear on natural gas right now. Some downward movement, I could understand that as confirmation if we were looking at it from a swing trading or at least an intraday perspective. Crude, a lot more interesting here today. Big sell working right back down into this support zone. Not a good look for crude, but a good look for those of us who have been bearish on crude, right? We were happy to see that. Now we're working into this support zone at around $50. I mean, we're kind of right now at that actual low, but I think it's probably wise to look at it as a zone of $50. At least that's what I'm doing, for better or worse at this point in time. That should be a pretty strong level of support. Just psychologically, I would expect. Break below that, certainly a bearish signal. Could be an area I think you could argue to at least take some profits if you are bearish, or maybe trail stops, or sell, convert into a spread or something along those lines. On the other side of things, because of the downward movement we've seen the last couple of days, well, again, now we know where resistance is, right? We know where we should not go above. And so if I'm looking at it, I'm interested in being a summer crude trader. Well, now I know where it needs to go before I can look to buy, where I'd see a bullish signal here at just approximately at $55. Working, I think we should respect this support. I think you have to continue to have a bearish mindset on it. But this is an interesting battle, just such a round number. No support for a while below it. I mean, whether you're calling it 42.50 or 45 or anywhere in between, once this gives out, there's just not a lot of support, at least in the short term. Could lead to more movement to the downside. And I love when things make resistance and I know where they shouldn't go. Makes it so much easier to manage trades. To say, okay, well, breaks resistance, I'm out. If it doesn't, I don't have to worry too much about it. But profit taking, or at least profit preservation as we approach this support zone, to me at least, that makes quite a bit of sense. I know, Ilka, you brought up Hershey. Never going to say a bad thing about Hershey, the stock. I'd probably intraday is probably how you're looking to get into it. You can kind of see here our last little breakout that we had here on the Hershey. I mean, this guy has just been insane. You want to talk strength, Hershey, these are tougher to get into, Ilka, because we don't get those pullback opportunities. So we have to be open to those little mini breaks, right? The little mini breaks, 2-day, 3-day resistance breaks. We can look into the intraday. If we want to try to find, some sort of an entry, some sort of a method to the madness on that level, really are tougher ones to get into, but also the easiest things to trade because, well, once you're in them, they just apparently just go up and up and up. So these are always a little trickier from that perspective. If it wasn't for this shadow that we set up here on the 7th, I'd argue that any upward movement tomorrow would be a signal. And I wouldn't fight if somebody said that it was, but that would kind of throw a little bit of cold water in my mind. But again, really at this point in time, anything bullish on Hershey, I would be the last person to say, what are you doing, dude? Because, well, history tells me that that's a bad thing to say when it comes to Hershey. Just showing incredible strength. And on Cell Green here, in an interesting spot. My only thing is they've got that weird news with the merger going on. I'm not sure if that's actually, come through one way or another, or any clarity on there. And that's kind of why I've been leaning away from them, Ilka. They've really been kind of stuck in this since they had that, they had some merger news, and they've really been weird gappers lately and kind of flatliners. And so I don't really mind the chart at all. A break above that from a purely technical point of view, you know me, Ilka, that's pretty nice looking. But with the kind of the backdrop behind it, and I'm not sure what to make of it. And if I'm not sure what to make of it, I'm not interested, for better or worse. And so I'd want to look closer into that side of things. I could understand, though, technically, I mean, that's a very nice looking breakout candidate. That That's very pretty. There is no two ways about that. Yeah, I mean, and it's been going on. I can't remember. I think it was Bristol Myers, if I remember right. And it was a couple months back, and ever since we've just seen not a whole lot happen. And I'm not sure exactly where they are in that process. And so they've kind of been a dead stock to me ever since that news because of that. I'm not like I said. May mean nothing. Maybe just maybe being paranoid, but when in doubt, I err on the side of being too paranoid versus not paranoid enough. So that is where we find ourselves, ladies and gentlemen, after a very interesting, boring day in the market. For a boring day in the market, there was definitely some interesting stuff. It's really shaping up to where there's going to be bullish or bearish opportunities for us as we let this week wind down. So if whatever we want, or if we're open to both, and I maintain that we probably should continue to be open to both within the market conditions right now. That's certainly how I'm looking at it, at least. We've got opportunities out there if we want them on both sides, which is always nice. It's always nice when there's bearish retracements, bearish breakdowns, bullish retracements, bullish breakouts, and I have some options, right? I hated Friday when everything needed to move. That's my least favorite way the market looks, is when everything has had a great week. It's really drug up the whole market. We're at resistance. We need something. That's my least favorite market. So I've really enjoyed just a little bit of downward movement we've had. It's amazing how much opportunity it feels like it's opened up for us these last couple of days. So should be a fun week for us. Of course, we got the Tackle 25 Mastermind group here tonight over at Tackle Trading. So for all the team members of the Tackle 25, that ought to be a good time. Have a good time over there. We, of course, also would always invite you to come over, join us as a pro member. We've got a free trial for you. Just head on over to tackletrading.com. We can get you hooked up. You can see what it is all about. Ladies and gentlemen, that will do the market recap today. But certainly, as always, guys, it's my pleasure. Appreciate everybody's time. Great to see you guys. As always, thanks for going through the routine with me. I know it helps me out. I hope it helps you guys out as well. If you are new around here, be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you can always be alerted to any videos we got. Get over to Instagram. I think X was the Instagram winner, US Steel. I think Coach T is going to be doing an analysis of US Steel over on Instagram, so be sure to check that out here. We've got our Women in Trading Mastermind group coming up at the end of the month, the last Friday of the month. So certainly would invite all of our female traders to join in, get a lot of good work done, probably have a lot of fun over there. Fellas, you're going to be stuck with me doing something else that night, but that's okay. You guys, we'll figure it out. So certainly invite all of our female team members to take advantage of that. I hear nothing but fantastic things about that. Be sure to join us on Twitter. Man, I have a laundry list today. Be sure to join us over on Twitter too at Tackle Trading. You can, of course, find me at FrankMartin23 on Twitter as well. I think that's the laundry list today. If it's not, it's close. So you guys are all very welcome. Thank you. It's my pleasure. I appreciate everybody's time. Those of you who watch later, thank you for watching. Appreciate you guys as well. If you ever need to comment, feel free to do so for sure. With that, ladies and gentlemen, get the heck out of here. Enjoy the mastermind group tonight if you're part of that team. If not, enjoy your Wednesday evening. We'll pick back up same time, same channel here tomorrow, see where today leads us. So thanks, everybody. You guys have a fantastic Wednesday night. I'll see you same time and place tomorrow. Bye, everyone.